Mad, bad and mostly harmless, poetry, pedagogy and, of course, tattoos. What drew you to poetry as a form in the first place?
When I was 9, we were asked to write a poem in class based on the structure of a poem. All is no in November, no leaves, no trees, no this, no that. And I wrote one and the teacher thought it was better than the original. And I quite liked that. I quite liked the positive attention, because not all the attention I got was positive, what with there being something weird about me. So I thought then, oh, I could be a writer. And I went through various phases in the next few years. I thought about writing novels, and I thought about writing comedy, and I thought about writing plays. And then when I left university, I did a correspondence course. Shows you how old I am. You could do courses by snail mail then, with the Open College of the Arts, and I discovered poetry again. How did you get into poetry, Lisa?
It was when I was about 14, so I was a bit older. And it was when we did Keats, Keats's poetry at school. And I completely fell in love with When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be.
Which you used to have as a screensaver many years ago, I remember it.
Yeah.
It used to just go across the screen, When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be. And for some reason you couldn't put any gaps in.
Ah, I'd completely forgotten that.
No, it goes across my mind every time I think of Keats, actually, that Lisa used to have When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be.
Back to Joanne.
So then, because I knew that Lisa hung out with some poets, I said...
I hung out with poets.
She hung out with
poets. Don't try this at home.
Unless they're your cousins.
Then do try this at home.
Where was I? Oh yes, so I asked you, do you know any good poetry classes? And you said Michael Donaghy at City. So I went there, not knowing anything about Michael Donaghy, not knowing anything about how well known the classes were. I have mixed memories about it, actually. Obviously Michael was a brilliant poet and a very good guide to what was good in poetry. But it was such a baptism of fire. They had the gag rule, so you'd go and you couldn't say anything about your poem until people had finished. And I used to actually have a terribly upset stomach before every single workshop. In the decades since, we've come to think differently about poetry pedagogy.
So how do you run workshops when you do them?
Well, I ask the person to, if they want to read the poem, I never make them, or if they would like me to read it. And then I have them say, just, is there anything you'd like feedback on? Because I know that if we have enough time allotted, in that time, with all these different people, everything that will need to be said will be said. But you've got to start somewhere. So I give the person some control over where you start. I always run my classes for the most nervous person in the room, and sometimes that's me. I don't think it's a badge of honour to be all toughened, actually. And I think the excuse for workshops is often, well, you know, when you send your work in, people are going to talk about your work. Yes, but they're not going to do it in front of you, are they?
That's a very good point.
Yes, and you're not going to have to compose yourself in front of anyone while you read that rejection note.
Back to Lisa. In 1999, Don Patterson, the poet, was running Salisbury Poetry Festival along with Joe Shapcott, and the theme of the festival was poetry in unusual places, and Don suggested to me that one of the things that they were thinking of was getting a poem as a tattoo, and I volunteered to have a poem tattooed. At that point, I think the plan was for it to be tattooed on my arse. And virtually as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I really regretted it. And then I got pregnant, so I could wimp out honourably. The poem was, however, commissioned, and fast forward 25 years, I've had it tattooed on my shoulder. The serpent sheds her skin, and yet the pattern she'd as soon forget recalls itself. By this I swear, I am the sentence that I bear.
Sounds like a prophecy, actually.
Michael Donaghy was an amazing poet. He's brilliant. If you haven't read any of his work,
Do.
I have had it tattooed in a place that you can see the start of it if I'm wearing short sleeves. But in order to see the whole thing, I have to literally bare my shoulder.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's.
Do you think so? I think it's really dull.
You think it's really dull?
I don't know. What do you think? Email us and let us know.
Because it is both visual, sight, and site specific, and verbal, and the interaction of the two. That is interesting.
Yes, I do think that's interesting. And I do think, again, the embodiment of it and the physicality of the showing, the act of having to bare my shoulder to show someone the words, I am the sentence that I bear, feels extremely appropriate.
Yes, and there's an intimacy to it.
Yes. Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, there is. 2 reasons for doing it now. I decided I would do it before my 60th birthday, which is soon. And also I had it done a few days after the 20th anniversary of Michael's death. So it was a commemorative act as well as everything else.
A really lovely commemorative act, I think.
I'm quite tempted for my back to be covered in text now. I probably won't get round to it, but you know, I kind of like the idea of being literally read like a book.
Well, like my brilliant late friend Karen Freeborn, who more or less did cover herself in text.
Did she?
She did, yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes, there were so many. Obviously, her dying was a sad thing in itself, but she turned herself into art, and that was lost as well.
Wow.
Which kind of added this extra dimension of sadness, really, because she'd spent years assembling this composition, I guess.
What did she have? Was it her own words as a writer?
No, various things. I mean, she had Jesus wept on the back of her neck, which is the shortest verse in either testament. I can't remember what the other things were, but it was mostly text. And Karen actually was aphantasic. I remember her explaining this to me as if I said to her a box of matches, she would just see the words a box of matches. Whereas I'm not. I would see, box of matches.
Yes.
An image of. But yeah, I remember we had this fantastic conversation one day when I was talking about becoming an author and, well, why I want to write really, and not being comfortable in myself, and saying that I had a fantasy of turning myself entirely into text. And she said, oh, can I have that? And I said, sure. But she was turning herself into text.
Wow.
You see, for me, turning myself into text just means disappearing into a shelf of books. So that all I say is what I meant to say.
Oh, so you think with text, all you say is what, if you put things in text, that's definitely what you meant to say?
Yeah, I mean, you can't control how it's interpreted. But I can own up to it. I can say, yes, at the point where I wrote that was what I meant to say, not that came out of my mouth in the middle of a conversation by accident, or I was scared, or I was trying to show off, or I was trying to fit in. That was what I meant.